Okay, welcome everyone. So good to be together. This is the third session of the Madwoman in the Rabbi's Attic, the tale of Yalta the Shrew with Miss Gila Fine. Such a pleasure to be together and learn together as always. Just a reminder that this class is part of the Folzman here at Drisha. With that, Gila, I'll turn it to you.
Welcome to the Madwoman in the Rabbi's Attic, part 3 of 4. It is lovely to see you all again, and this time I am coming to you from Los Angeles. I am in my American hotel room with my American hotel coffee and my American severe jet lag, but we're going to power through and it's going to be good. And this time, this class is all about you. This is the class where you actually go to work on the text yourselves and work your magic and try and understand what it's actually saying. But more on that in a little bit. Let's begin by just reorienting ourselves and reminding ourselves where we are. Last week we did our initial reading of the story of Yalta, and we saw that at face value what we have before us is a classic Shrew narrative. We've got the comedy, we've got the scenes of verbal abuse and physical violence, we've got the pitiable and placating husband, and we've got, most importantly, the bad-tempered mad woman who doesn't get her own way and unleashes her fury at everyone in her path. And I asked, is this really the story the Talmud is telling? And I told you that the answer is almost always going to be no, because rabbinic storytelling is defined primarily by the false front. What these stories seem to be saying, what they are actually saying are diametrically opposite. And we have to be able to break through that facade and go from the text to the subtext in order to unpack the deeper, more complex message that the rabbis have hidden for us between the lines. And so most of last week was dedicated to exactly how we did that. And this week you are going to take the reading rules of rabbinic storytelling and you are going to apply them to the story of Yalta. And we're doing this in order for you to be able to do this on your own later with any rabbinic story you might come across. I would say with any story you come across, but this is particularly true in the case of rabbinic storytelling. I obviously do not want you to be dependent on me. I want for you to be empowered to read the stories of the Talmud on your own. And so I'm going to share my screen, and this is what we're going to do. Please do click on the source sheet, though, because you are going to want to have it for when I send you into Chavruta. So our main text, as a reminder, is source number 18. And the first thing you're going to do is you're going to zoom in and do a close reading of the text. For those of you who don't remember the rules offhand, they are conveniently there for you in number 20. Evie, please take control of the waiting room because I can't admit people.
I will be sure to do it. I'm just...
Okay, yeah. All right, so you're going to zoom in and do a close reading of number 18. That means you're going to break the story up into acts or scenes. Again, envision the story as if it's being enacted on a stage. Every time you imagine the curtain going down or the lights turning off, that is a new act. 2, setting. Identify where and when each act takes place. This will also help you break the story down. Every time there is a change in time or in place, that will be a new act. 3, identify the characters in each act. Try and figure out how they're presented to us. Try and understand their dynamics, their relationships. I think we've already picked up on the fact that there's some very interesting relationships happening between the 3 characters in this story. 4, follow the plot line through, understand why the story develops the way that it does. And 5, and this is extremely significant with regard to this story, be on the lookout for symbols, motifs, and themes. I think I mentioned last week, there are 2 very important symbols in this story. If you figure out what they are and what they actually mean, you will have cracked the story. That's the first thing you're going to do. The next thing you're going to do is you're going to zoom out and look at the story in context. And again, there are 4 layers of context that we need to take into account. The first layer of context is the immediate context, the passage that comes directly before our story in the Talmud, and it is conveniently located for you in number 24. So once you do a close reading of 18, I'm going to put these instructions in the chat when I'm done. Once you do a close reading of 18, zoom out and look at 24. That will show you how the rabbis frame the story. The next thing to do is zoom out even further and look at the story within the broad context of rabbinic literature. Now, I mentioned last week that Yalta is the most named woman of the Talmud. So I'm going to ask you to look at some of the other stories that we have about her so you get a deeper, more well-rounded view of her character, and those stories are conveniently located for you in number 23. The next layer of context is the broad context of world literature. We kind of did that when we looked at different shrews from the Western canon, so you don't have to do that. The final layer of context is the historical context, the world of the rabbis in which a story is set. And we'll talk about that next week because there's some historical information that's very relevant to understanding this particular narrative. The last thing to do is relate to the three reading hypotheses of rabbinic literature. One, omnisignificance. Assume that every single sentence, every single clause, every single word is there for a reason. Nothing is redundant, so look closely at each and every word. Two, interiority. Get into the heads and the hearts of the characters. Try and figure out what they think and feel every step of the way. And finally, and this is the most important, axiology. Why are the rabbis telling us a story? What is it that they would like for us to learn? So, there's also a fly in this hotel room whose sole purpose is to distract me from teaching this class. So once again, our main text is, I'm just going to put this in the chat so you have it for when I send you into breakout rooms. The main text is in number 18. The reading rules are number 20. The immediate context is number 24, and the broad context is number 23. All right, enjoy everyone.
Welcome back, everyone.
All right, I think that's everyone. By a show of thumbs, how was that? Okay, great. I look forward to seeing how well you've done. Again, most of our discussion will be next week, but I want to begin by framing our discussion in the few minutes we have left. I'm not sure if I shared this with you, but even if I did, let me do it again. As I said, rabbinic literature is defined primarily by its false front. And as I mentioned last week, stories in the Talmud can never just be read, they must always be reread. And in this respect, my methodology for learning Talmudic stories is somewhat inspired by this quote by Adrian Rich, who said, "Revision, the act of looking back, of seeing with fresh eyes, of entering an old text from a new critical direction, is for us more than a chapter in cultural history. It is an act of survival." I'm pretty sure Adrian Rich never studied Talmud, but that is as good a description of studying Talmud as I know. The stories of the Talmud must be revisioned or reread. And it is to our rereading of the story of Yalta that we now proceed to. So I'm going to begin our rereading of the story of Yalta by looking at another literary rereading, a rereading of the story of the other mad woman in the attic. And I want to go back to Jane Eyre's Bertha Mason. Remember her? The original mad woman in the attic? So Jane Eyre, published in the 19th century, huge hit. About 120 years after Jane Eyre was first published, in the 20th century, British Dominican novelist Jean Rhys came along and said, hang on, we don't really know anything about Bertha Mason, save the fact that she is a mad woman in an attic. But no mad woman in an attic is a mad woman in an attic born. Something must have happened to get her to be this way. And so Jean Rhys decides to write her story. The result is the very beautiful, very poignant Wide Sargasso Sea, which is a prequel to Jane Eyre. Prequel, opposite from sequel, it's a story that comes before Jane Eyre. It is the story of Bertha Mason's childhood as a daughter of a slave owner in post-emancipation Jamaica. After the emancipation, the natives turn on Bertha and her family. They murder her baby brother, they burn her house down, and they send her mother spiraling into madness. Can I have a reader at this stage, please? If you'd like to volunteer to read, please raise your electronic hand. And Evie or myself, Anita, as ever. Very dependable. I love that you do that, Anita, and I can rely on you. Would you please take us through number 21?
As I knew they would be, they were waiting for me under the sandbox tree. There were two of them, a boy and a girl. They looked so harmless and quiet. No one would have noticed the glint in the boy's eyes. Then the girl grinned and began to crack the knuckles of her fingers. At each crack I jumped and my hands began to sweat. I was holding some school books in my right hand and I shifted them to under my arm, but it was too late. There was a mark on the palm of my hand and a stain on the cover of the book. They closed in on me and started talking. The girl said, "Look, the crazy girl, you're crazy like your mother. Your aunt frightened to have you in the house. She sent you for the nuns to lock up. Your mother walked about with no shoes and stockings on her feet. She tried to kill her husband, and she tried to kill you too that day you go to see her. She have eyes like zombie, and you have eyes like zombie too. You don't want to look at me, eh? I make you look at me." She pushed me and the books I was carrying fell to the ground.
Thank you. And this, says Jean Reese, this is what drives Bertha Mason to insanity. Quote, "You crazy like your mother." Treat someone as if they are mad often enough and they will eventually become so. A very similar point is made by 20th century theorist Susie Kaplow in an essay titled Getting Angry, which discusses the fraught relationship between women and anger. When men get angry, says Kaplow, they are indignant. When women get angry, they are irrational. And this too becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. Treat a woman as if she is ill-tempered, irrational, and shrewish, and she will become ill-tempered, irrational, and shrewish. Can I have another reader, please? Laura, thank you. Would you take us through number 22, please?
A woman in our society is denied the forthright expression of her healthy anger. Her attempts at physical confrontation seem ridiculous. Ladies do a slow burn, letting out their anger indirectly in catty little phrases, often directed against a third party, especially children. A woman has learned to hold back her anger. It's unseemly, aesthetically displeasing, and against the sweet, pliant, feminine image to be angry. And the woman fears her own anger. She, the great conciliator, the steadier of rock boats, moves out of her fear to quiet not only others' anger, but also her own. Small wonder that when the vacuum-sealed lid bursts off, the angry woman seems like a freaked-out nut. Her frenzy is intensified by the shakiness of her commitment to her own anger. What if she's really wrong? What if the other person is right? Or worse, and this is the greatest fear, hits back with, "You're crazy. I don't know what you're so mad about."
Thank you. And this, according to Kaplow, is how the shrew goes from angry to crazy, from raging to deranged. Remember, we spoke last week about the double meaning of the word mad. A woman who is mad is so easily turned into a mad woman. All that it takes is for someone to dismiss her as such. "You're crazy. I don't know what you're so mad about." Exactly the response that Ulla gives Yalta after she smashes all those jars of wine. Ulla dismisses Yalta as a raging shrew, but is that really who she is? So next week, we are going to explore both the character of Yalta and the framing of the story, and we're going to reread the story itself and see if Yalta really is the shrew she is accused of being. So with that, I wish you a great week, and I'll see you for the part 4 and final next week. Please go.
Thank you so much, Gila, and thank you to all the participants who are always a great important part of our learning community. Just a reminder that our full classes are open for registration. I'd like to highlight that we actually have a class in just about 15 minutes at 1:45 p.m. Eastern, called Why Pray in Community. And I would love to see you there. Otherwise, as you know, the signups are always open on our website, drisha.org/classes. Thank you again, Gila, and we'll see each other again next week. Lehitraot.